Shalom everyone, hope everyone's doing well. Be'ezat Hashem, today in Masechet Sanhedrin we're going to learn Yetet Amud Bet 19b. We're holding at the two dots towards the top of the page, Lo Choletz ve'lo Choltzin. We're going to have two sections in today's learning. The first section will be a discussion about the king doing yibum or chalitza, and also regarding marrying a widow of a prior king, which is really a machloket Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim in both cases. The second section we'll get into is a fascinating storyline in Navi, where Dovid and Meirav married two daughters of Shaul, and we'll see exactly how it was permitted with two different approaches. So B'ezat Hashem, let's see towards the top of Yetet Amud Aleph, the two dots, Lo Choletz ve'lo Choltzin v'chule. We had in our Mishnah machloket. We said that the Chachamim, the Tanakam of our Mishnah said a king is not allowed to do chalitza or yibum. It's a bizayon, it's disgraceful to him. Rabbi Yehuda disagreed and said that he could. So the Gemara says the issue with the position of Rabbi Yehuda is that, as we're about to show, is there's a rule: a king is not allowed to negate his own honor. This is from Masechet Kiddushin. Maybe lower positions are allowed to, but a king is not allowed to. So the Gemara says, "Eini, is it true?" Sorry, I forgot to mention. Rashi explains the reason it's a bizayon for a king to do these things is because chalitza, the woman spits in front of him, that would be disgraceful. And with yibum, the children born of that are called on the name of his brother. So it would be considered like he's secondary to his brother. So therefore the Chachamim say you can't do that. But Rabbi Yehuda says that you could. He could. So the Gemara says, Eini, is it true that he could do those things? In Masechet Kiddushin, even according to the Shita who says a nasi, who's a leader of the Jews, he could negate his own honor, kvodo machul, and it's effective. But melech shemachal kvodo, ein kvodo machul. If a king negates his own honor, he says, I want to forgive my own honor, ein kvodo machul, he's not allowed to. Shene'emar, because the pasuk tells us, Som tasim alecha melech, you shall place a king on you, and the emphasis, the double language, emphasizes the fact his honor has to be on you. You have to have awe of him. You have to have awe of him. He can't behave in a way that would lower the kavod you have for him, and therefore he's not allowed to do yibum or chalitza. How could Rabbi Yehuda say he's allowed to? So the Gemara answers mitzvah shani. This is a very interesting answer. For the sake of a mitzvah, he is allowed to be mochel on his honor. For anything else, he's not allowed to. But since yibum or chalitza is a mitzvah, therefore Rabbi Yehuda says he is allowed to negate his honor for that. Now the Chachamim apparently argue and say you're not allowed to, but that is the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda. Okay. What I would assume, I didn't see this inside, but what I would assume is that the reason you're allowed to, a king would be allowed to for a mitzvah, is because be'etzem, mitzvah is for kavod shamayim. So perhaps he can negate his kavod for kavod shamayim, but not for any other reason. What do you mean kavod shamayim? For doing a mitzvah. All right, let's continue. So we said in the Mishnah that we had a machloket also. The Chachamim said, Tanakam of the Mishnah said, back on Yerchet Amud Aleph, that a king is not allowed to marry an almana. He's not allowed to marry a widow, even if it's the widow of a previous king. Rabbi Yehuda argued, and he said he could marry the widow of a previous king, and he brought a proof because the pasuk says by Dovid and Meirav, "Ve'etna lecha et beit adonecha," I will give you the house of your master, ve'etneshei adonecha b'cheikecha, and the wives of your master. So he interpreted neshei literally, which means David married the wives of Shaul, the previous king. Proof, says Rabbi Yehuda, that a king could marry the widow of a previous king. Otherwise, you can't. But that was Rabbi Yehuda's argument. So the Braita says, Tanya, the Amr Lola Rabbi Yehuda, that the Chachamim said back to Rabbi Yehuda, that's not the pshat in the pasuk. Rather, the pshat is Nashim hareuyot lo mi beit hamelech. It means that David was going to marry the women who were fitting for him to marry from the house of the king. Whom I knew, who were they? Meirav and Michal. Now this brings us to a fascinating storyline we're going to get to in this next section. Dovid and Meirav married seemingly two daughters of Shaul HaMelech. That's what the pasuk means. Not the wives of Shaul, because he could not marry a widow of a previous king, say the Chachamim. But he did marry the girls from the house of Shaul, which were his daughters. Now at face value, this becomes problematic, because you can't marry two sisters. So that's what the next Gemara will focus on, What exactly happened here with David marrying two of the daughters of Shaul HaMelech? Says the Gemara, Sha'alu Talmidav et Reb Yossi. The students asked Reb Yossi, Hech nasa David shtei achayot b'chayein. How could David HaMelech marry two sisters in their lifetime? We know the Torah says that you're not allowed to marry two sisters, assuming the one that he had first married is still alive. You're not allowed to marry a woman if you were married to her sister in her lifetime. So it sounds like he married these two sisters, Michal and Meirav, and that's totally prohibited. How could David do this? So we're going to have two different approaches in terms of what happened in this storyline. Fascinating story here. So Amar lahen, Reb Yossi responded. This is the first answer. Michal achar mitat Meirav nas'a. Simple. He married Michal after Meirav had passed away. So he had married Meirav, she died, then he married Michal, who was her sister, which is totally permissible. That's the first answer. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha Omer, Kiddushei ta'ut hayu lo b'Meirav. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha says, no, you're making a mistake. Really, the entire Kiddushin was mistaken with Meirav, meaning to say, he was never really married to Meirav. There was a mistake, which we'll get to what it was in a minute. That Kiddushin was not binding, and therefore, when he married Michal, he was not marrying the sister of his wife, as he was never actually married to Michal. So Meirav's Kiddushin was not effective, and Michal's Kiddushin was effective. How do we know this? Shne'amar, because the pasuk tells us that Dovid HaMelech says to Shaul, Tina et ishti et Michal. He says to Shaul, give me my wife, Michal. Double language. Asher erasti li, that I married her, b'meya arlot plishtim, with 100 foreskins of the plishtim. Now this is a very vague drasha, but the Gemara is going to explain to us later that what happened was, very interesting, is that Shaul HaMelech said to David, if you want to marry my daughter, go kill 100 Philistines. Those were the enemies of the Jews at the time. Not to be confused with Palestinians. It's two different people altogether. The Palestinians have no yichus in Eretz Yisrael. The Plishtim perhaps did, but they are not the same as the Palestinians. And he said, if you go kill 100 of those enemies and bring me their foreskins, so then you could marry my daughter. And he specifically said, Tina et ishti et Michal. David said, give me my wife, Michal, because I'm giving you these 100 foreskins like you had asked for. So the Gemara's my Talmud, what's the limud here that the first Kiddushin was mistaken? So Rav Papa, because the emphasis is, David HaMelech was saying, Michal is ishti. It's an emphasis. Michal ishti, velo Meirav ishti. The first one was actually mistaken. I agreed to you, and that was not effective. So the Gemara wants to know now, what's the story here? According to the second shita, the first one was not effective. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha, Meirav's Kiddushin with David was not impactful. So my Kiddushei ta'ut, why was it not effective? So in order to appreciate this, we have to know the backstory. Because what happened was like this. There was an enemy of the Jews called Goliath. Goliath in English it's called. Goliath was a giant, a powerful warrior, and he was cursing Hashem and speaking negatively about the Jews. And Shaul HaMelech, who was the king at the time, said, anyone who kills Goliath, I'm going to give them tremendous wealth, Osher Gadol, and he'll marry my daughter. Vaya Aish Asher Yakenu, this is in Shmuel Aleph, it says, anyone who kills Goliath, Ya'ashrenu HaMelech Osher Gadol, the king will make him very wealthy, he'll give him wealth, and he'll give him his daughter. It means that that man will marry Dovid HaMelech. So Dovid HaMelech, we know, went and killed Goliath, and Azal Katle, David killed this Goliath, and Shaul turned to David and he said, but 1 second. You didn't give me Kiddushin to marry my daughter. In order to marry a girl, you have to give Kiddushin to her or to her father, depending on the situation. But you have to give Kiddushin, which in the context here is going to be given with Kesef or Shava Kesef. Equivalent value you could give and then create a marriage. So Shaul said, well, how do you want to marry my daughter? If you want to use the money that I owe you, Osher Gadol, to marry my daughter by negating that, now you can marry my daughter with it, that doesn't work, because we learned in Masechet Kiddushin, if you try to marry a woman with a loan, it's not effective. So Amar Lo, Shaul said to David, Mil ve'itlach gabai, you have only a loan by me. But the Mishnah says in Kiddushin, Va'mekadesh b'milveh and mekudeshet, you can't marry somebody with a loan. The money that I owe you cannot be utilized for Kiddushin, because the rule is you have to give hana'ah, you have to give benefit at the time of Kiddushin. Negating a loan is not giving benefit. So therefore you can't marry with that. And therefore actually, David was not married to Meirav, because that was the one that he would have given to. He would have given that daughter to David, but that Kiddushin was not effective. And Shaul was right. So Azalya Avala Adriel instead, says Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha, this is all within his position, Shaul went and married Meirav off to another fellow whose name was Adriel. Like it says in the Pasuk, also in Shmuel Aleph, Vayehi ba'et tet et Meirav bat Shaul David. It was when he gave Meirav bat Shaul to David, he didn't give it, and instead he gave her to Adriel, the Gomer. So the point is that was the mistake, which is why, says Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha, the Kiddushin of Meirav was not effective to David, which is why David was allowed to marry Michal. Okay, so the Gemara continues now and tells us, so what happened with Michal then? Amar Le, so Shaul said to David, Michal, if you want to marry my daughter Michal, Zil aiti li mea arlot plishtim. As I mentioned before, he said, go bring me 100 foreskins of the plishtim, go kill 100 of the enemies, and the foreskins you bring me, that will be the kiddushin for Michal now. So Azal aiti le, David went and killed him and brought it. Amar Le, so Shaul said, still it's not effective. Why? Because milve upruta is itlach gabai. This is very interesting. This gets into a sugya in Masechet Kiddushin, which is as follows. If a man gives a woman Kiddushin, he gives her a pruta, which is effective, but also she owed him money. So he negates the loan and he gives her a pruta. There is a discussion in Masechet Kiddushin, is his intention to marry her with the loan, which is not effective, or with the money he's giving her now, which is effective. So Shaul thought, milva upruta daitea milva, that when there's a loan and a pruta, the intent of the kiddushin is of the man giving the kiddushin is on the loan, and it's not effective. So therefore Shaul said, you're not married to Michal, even though you brought the 100 foreskins of the plishtim. David savar, but David was of the opinion, which is the psak, seemingly, milveu pruta da'atea pruta, that if you have such a situation, the focus is on the pruta, and the kiddushin is considered effective. So therefore, David held he was married to Michal, which was true. Shaul thought the focus was on the loan, and it's not effective. And the Gemara says an alternative understanding of their discrepancy. Everyone agrees the psak is that the focus is on the pruta, and it should have been effective. However, Shaul thought that the foreskins of the plishtim is not worth anything. It's not shava pruta, so it's not effective. But David thought that since it is worth a pruta because it could be fed as food, that doesn't sound so pleasant, but those foreskins could be used as food for dogs and cats, so therefore it has value and the kiddushin should go through. Bottom line is, we've explained now, according to Rabbi Yossi, both of the kiddushins were effective. He only married Michal after Meirav passed away. And according to Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha, the first one was completely ineffective, as David tried to marry Meirav with the loan, which is not effective. And then there was this discrepancy in opinion why Shaul thought he wouldn't be married to Michal, and David thought that he would have, and he actually was married to Michal. So the Gemara now turns back to Rabbi Yossi, the first explanation. For Rabbi Yossi, Michal so according to Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha, this was the source that the kiddushin for Michal was effective and not of Meirav. But Rabbi Yossi holds they were both effective. So how does he explain this pasuk? So Rabbi Yossi follows his reasoning. The Tanya is the Braita teach. Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yossi used to expound the following psukim that seem to mix up names. Because Ketiv in Shmuel Bet, the psukim tell us, Vayikach HaMelech et Shnei Bnei Ritzpah. The king took the two sons of Ritzpah, Bat Ayah, the daughter of Ayah, Asher Yolda Shaul, who had given birth for Shaul, et Armoni, Vet Mephibosheth, these two sons who were Armoni and Mephibosheth, Vet Chameshet Bnei Michal, and the 5 sons of Michal, Asher Yolda Adriel Hamcholati Vegomer, that she had given birth to children for her husband Adriel Hamcholati. The problem is, Michal, after Shaul thought she was not married to David, he didn't give her to marry Adriel. Adriel was married to Meirav, the older sister. Michal was actually given to someone else whose name was Palti ben Laish, which we'll discuss later, which was not an effective kiddushin. We'll discuss that later because she was really married to David. But the pasuk seems to say she was married to Adriel. So what's going on? V'chila Adriel natna. Was Michal given to Adriel? V'alo Palti ben Laish natna. She was actually given to a fellow whose name was Palti ben Laish, which we'll discuss more tomorrow. Like the pasuk says in Shmuel Aleph, it says, Shaul natanet Michal bito. Shaul gave Michal, his daughter, Eshet David, was really the wife of David, and Shaul did this thing wrong. He said, Palti ben Laish v'gomer. He gave her to Palti ben Laish. So why is she alluded to as the wife of Adriel, if really Meirav is the wife of Adriel? Halamakish kiddushay Meirav la Adriel. That rather the Psukim are comparing the marriage of Meirav to Adriel, to Michal Bito, L'Kiddushay Michal Lepalti, to the marriage of Michal and Palti. Ma Kiddushay Michal Lepalti Ba'avera, just as Michal was married to David and therefore her marriage to Palti was Ba'avera, was wrong. Af Kiddushay Meirav L'Kiddushay Michal. Af Kiddushay Meirav L'Adriel Ba'avera. So to the Kiddushin of Meirav to Adriel was also incorrect because she was also married to David, as Rabbi Yossi holds in his opinion. So that's why it compares them, and it writes that Michal was the wife of Adriel to compare their marriages, that they were both inappropriate. Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha nami achtiv et chamesh et bnei Michal bat Shol. So how does Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha explain that verse? He holds that Meirav was actually fully married to Adriel. So what was the issue? So what's the pshat in the pasuk? Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha. Rabbi Yeshua says back, B'chi Michal yolda, v'alo Meirav yolda. Wait a second. The pasuk says that Michal gave birth to these children, but it's not true. Meirav really gave birth to these 5 children. Rather, the pshat in the pasuk is, it wants to emphasize Meirav yolda Michal gidla. It calls her his wife and she gave birth to these children, but really, she raised those children. Meirav gave birth to these children, she passed away, and Michal ended up raising the children of Meirav. Lefikach nikru el shma, that's why she's called on their name. Meaning is that since Michal raised the children of Meirav, so therefore she is called on the name of as their mother, which teaches you anybody that raises an orphan in their house, the pasuk considers it as if he gave birth to that child. So that's the chidush of the pasuk, says Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha. Really, as we explained, Meirav's kiddushin was ineffective. Michal's kiddushin was effective. What's the pshat? The pasuk reverse seems to imply that Michal was married to Adriel. If she was really married afterwards, she was given to Palti ben Laish. We're going to see it was wrong though. So says Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha, the pshat is that she raised the children of Meirav, so it was as if she gave birth to those children. Okay, 1 second. Right, beautiful. Okay, now the Gemara now continues on this same note. It wants to show us other sources that if you raise an orphan in your house, it's as if you birthed them. Chanina kra Yochanan v'ishto Elazar v'Geula v'Shmuel b'limudo siman. Rabbi Chanina Omer Mehacha. Rabbi Chanina says we have another source for this idea because in Megillat Ruth it says V'tikra'ena lo hashchenot shem. The neighbors called her a name, Lemor, saying Yulad ben leNaami, that a child has been born to Naami. The problem is Naami yalda. Did Naami give birth to that child? Valo Ruth yalda. Ruth, which was her daughter-in-law, actually gave birth to that child. Elo, what it means is Ruth yalda v'Naami gidla. Is Ruth had given birth, but Naami raised the child, and therefore she's called on the name of that child. Lefikach nikra Shema, so the child is called on her name. Rabbi Yochanan says another source in Devrei Yamim when it talks about Kalev. We had this in Masechet Megillah. It says in the pasuk, the Ishto, the wife of Kalev, was Hayehudit, or the Yersa on the side is Hayehudiyah, which was a woman named Yehudiah, which was actually Bitya, the woman who saved Moshe from the Nile. And Yaldad Yered Avigdor Vegomer, she gave birth, and these are all references to Moshe Rabbeinu. Eila b'nei Bitya bat Paro asher lakach Mered. These are the children of Bitya, the daughter of Paro, who was married to Mered. So Mered ze Kalev. Mered refers to Kalev. Mered. Why was he called Mered? Marad ba'atzat meraglim, because he rebelled against the advice of the spies. Spies wanted to come back from Eretz Yisrael and say negative things against Eretz Yisrael. Yoshua and Kalev rebelled against that. Bitya yolda, but this is the point. But the pasuk seems to imply that Bitya gave birth to Moshe. Valo Yocheved yolda. We know Yocheved was the mother of Moshe, the biological mother. Yocheved yolda, Bitya gidla. It's true, Yocheved gave birth to Moshe, but since Bitya raised Moshe, she's considered the mother. Lefigach nekral Shema, like we said before. Rabbi Elazar Amar Mehachi says another source in Tehillim. The pasuk says, "Ga'alta bezra amecha," you redeemed with your strength your nation. Bnei Yaakov Yosef Sela, the sons of Yaakov and Yosef forever. V'chi Yosef Yalad, did Yosef give birth to the Jewish people? Really, Yaakov. Alo Yaakov Yalad. He was the head of the Shvatim. He was the father of all the Jewish people. Elo Yaakov Yalad Yosef Kilkel. Since Yaakov gave birth to them, but Yosef fed them. When they came down to Egypt, Yosef took care of them and gave them all sustenance. Therefore, he's called like the father of those people, of the Jews. Similar idea. Anybody who teaches his friend's son Torah, the Torah makes it as if, looks at it as if he gave birth to that child. Unbelievable. As the pasuk says, Ve'ela toldot Aaron and Moshe. First it says, these are the descendants of Aaron and Moshe. And then it says, Ve'ela shmot ben Aaron, only lists the children of Aaron. So what's the pshat? To teach you, since Moshe taught the children of Aaron Torah, it's as if Moshe was the father of those children. Aaron Yolad and Moshe limed, Aaron gave birth to them. Moshe taught them the Torah. Lefiga nikra shmo, therefore they're called on his name. Similar idea, L'chen ko'ama Hashem el Beit Yaakov, says Hashem to the house of Yaakov, Asher pada et Avraham, that Yaakov redeemed Avraham. V'cheicha matzinu b'Yaakov shepadao la'Avraham. Where do we find that Yaakov redeemed Avraham? Amar Rav Yehuda shepadao mitzar gidul banim. Yaakov took on the responsibility to raise the Shvatim. So he exempted Avraham Avinu from the pain of raising those children. Like it says in Yeshaya, Lo ata yevosh Yaakov. Yaakov will not be ashamed. What does it mean? Lo ata yevosh Yaakov me'aviv. Yaakov will not be ashamed from his father Yitzchak. Velo ata panav yechveru me'aviv. Nor will his face be whitened, embarrassed from Avraham. Meaning to say is that as the pasuk says by Avraham, he should have really raised the Jewish people. Because it's ve'erbeiti et zarecha, I will increase your children, kechol hayam, like the kechol hayam, like the sand of the sea, etc. So really, Avram should have had to deal with raising the Jewish people. Yaakov took that responsibility, so they're called on his name, and it's as if he exempted Avram from all of that tsar. Okay, but the point that we're making is a similar idea is when you teach your son Torah, or as we said, your friend's son Torah, or if you raise an orphan, and it's as if you've given birth to them, it's a similar idea. We're going to stop here towards the bottom of Yitet Amud Bet. Be'ezrat Hashem, tomorrow we'll pick up with a discussion about Palti ben Laish. This is going to be a fascinating thing. That man who had married Michal in the interim, inappropriately after David's Kiddushin, L'kulei Alma, was effective. All right, in the meantime, we'll stop here. Be'ezrat Hashem, everybody have a wonderful day. All the best.